It's now my pleasure to introduce the Associate Director General, Civil Aviation, Transport Canada, Andy Cook. With more than 30 years of aviation management, training, and operations experience, Cook most recently held the position of Manager of Strategic Analysis and Solutions at CAE. With extensive management experience, he's commanded across the breadth of military air operations from single-role detachments to wing base level of more than 1,000 persons. Cook holds an ATP certificate and a Master of Military Operational Art and Science degree from the United States Air Force Command and Staff College and multiple bachelor's degrees. Please join me in welcoming Associate Director General Andy Cook. Either one of those.
Sure. Wow. Who is he talking about? That guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Clearly not me. Stacy knows that. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I know you guys didn't get a break between the last presentation and mine, so I'll try to tell some jokes, do some tap dancing. But seriously, though, I'll probably only speak for maybe 20 minutes, and there'll be a couple of minutes for questions, because I think there might be some. So let's get into it, shall we? So thank you very much for inviting me to speak this afternoon at the 67th Air Safety Forum. I'd like to speak to you today a little about the conference's theme of moving forward together from a regulatory standpoint, and also give you some of my professional views. But before I do, let's get to know each other just a little better. My name is Andy, and I was a pilot. Although I'm now a nondescript bureaucrat, there was a time when I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. I loved university, so I did a degree in biochemistry, but I didn't become a scientist. I did a degree in English, but I didn't become a scholar. And a degree in education, but I didn't become a teacher. Instead, having obtained a commercial license and a multi-IFR while in university, I joined the Royal Canadian Air Force and became a military pilot. My military flying took me through tours as a flying instructor on the CT-114 Tudor to the C-130 Hercules in both the air refueling and tactical air transport roles, to a tour with the RCAF Snowbirds as a team coordinator, and finally as commanding officer of 437 Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force, our strategic transport and refueling squadron, on the now elderly and very much in the news if you're Canadian Airbus A310, which stranded our Prime Minister in India over the weekend for a couple of days. Glad I was not the boss then, I will tell you. There were some ground tours along the way too, sadly, but after completing the United States Air Force Air Command and Staff College at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, and I'll tell you, I'm very proud to be an Air Command and Staff College graduate, because in the Canadian Armed Forces, you only get a Joint Command and Staff College qualification. And completing the USAF Air War College through distance learning, I requalified on the beautiful C-130 as a base commander in 17-wing Winnipeg, Manitoba. But then, my military career ended, and I accepted a position as a director of flight operations at a Western Canadian regional operator and got qualified on the marvelous ATR-42 as a captain. In that role, I got wind of my most important upcoming assignment, that of future grandfather, which I have reprised 2 more times since, I'm very, very proud to add. And my wife and I moved for the 14th, and we hope the last time, to be close to our kids. Worked at CAE in Defense and Security for a side gig of about 18 months before I started at Transport Canada in April of 2021, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in a very different air operational environment from that to which I was used. Why do I tell you all this? Well, partly because I'm a pilot, and next to my aircraft, I am my favorite discussion topic, but also to underscore that as a government regulator, I don't come from a purely bureaucratic pedigree. That affords me the opportunity at work to ask questions like, why the heck do we do it this way? And is there not an easier, better, faster, more efficient way? Sometimes I get answers that surprise me because they dispel my previously held belief that obviously some folks haven't been out there in the real world before. And I think that it affords my colleagues a bit of a different, if occasionally irksome and annoying perspective on operational and regulatory issues. But I can say that although the bureaucratic framework upon which most civil aviation regulatory bodies sit is not naturally prone to agile decision and resolution, The people who work on regulatory matters at Transport Canada are as fine a bunch of professionals as anyone with whom I've had the pleasure to serve. Creating, promulgating, and enforcing civil aviation regulations is a surprisingly time-consuming process, I have come to learn. And to use an aviation metaphor, while some may want change to be enacted at the speed of an F-18, we're occasionally only able to get the true airspeed of a Twin Otter or a DC-3. But like those slower aircraft, those decisions often result in much-needed deliveries, if a little on the slow side. Creating regulations takes time and consultation with industry and stakeholders like ALPA. And being able to move forward together means that we need to take the time it takes to get the collaboration right. And I think, on the whole, we do. ALPA is not the only union with which we deal in the conduct of our business, but it may well be one of the largest. And while our own Transport Canada inspector pilots are not members of ALPA, we also have a very cordial and productive relationship with their union. At the end of the day, though, the core principle that binds us all together is the belief that in professional aviation, safety is not just part of the job, it is the job. So I'm pleased to be here in beautiful Chicago to share some thoughts from a personal, professional, and Government of Canada perspective in the realm of aviation safety. And I'm even more happy to be doing so from the venue where the cornerstone document, like the very room where the cornerstone document of international civil aviation, the Convention on International Civil Aviation, commonly known as the Chicago Convention, that's for pilots, was signed on December 7th, 1944. If there were ever a more fitting location to host an aviation safety forum with the underlying theme moving forward together, I can't think of where that would be. Just think of how far civil aviation has come since those formative days in wartime Chicago. We have truly moved forward since then, and our challenge is to continue to do so. I think it's instructive to look at the wording of the preamble to the Chicago Convention as it really resonates as the playbook for aviation regulators past, present, and future. And I'm going to read it just for a second. It reads, "Whereas the future development of international civil aviation can greatly help to create and preserve friendship and understanding among the nations and peoples of the world, yet its abuse can become a threat to general security. And whereas it is desirable to avoid friction and to promote that cooperation between nations and peoples upon which the peace of the world depends, therefore, the undersigned governments, having agreed on certain principles and arrangements in order that the international civil aviation may be developed in a safe and orderly manner, and that international air transport services may be established on the basis of equality of opportunity and operated soundly and economically, have accordingly conducted this convention to that end." It's no accident that the convention's preamble refers to safety. And while there are occasionally times when regulators and unions have differing viewpoints, safety is one where we have always been, are now, and will be in the future in complete lockstep. While I have a professional interest in the other areas listed in the preamble, such as equality of opportunity and economical operation, my job as Associate Director General of Civil Aviation in Canada is 100% in the aviation safety lane. We have security folks, and we have policy, business, and economics folks, but civil aviation is safety, only safety, and nothing but safety. I heard mention yesterday during the panel in the morning of properly trained and properly rested pilots. And as a pilot myself, I can't agree more that the right people with the right tools and training are needed in an operational environment as complex and inhospitable as that in which you put yourselves every day. And although my logbook is a lot thinner than most of yours, and it might be the only thing about me that's thinner than you, I have experienced flight in bad weather with icing, slippery runways, and strong crosswinds, and 150 plus people behind me, counting on me to bring the skills I was taught to the fight, and being as physically rested and prepared to deal with those challenges as I could be. Anything less was and is unacceptable. And I've experienced the feeling about 12 hours into a crew day that ended up delayed because of diplomatic clearance problem, something most of you probably don't have, of being so tired and watching the sunrise in front of me, taunting me as if to say, "You thought you were going to be asleep by now, didn't you?" And turning to the person beside me and saying, "Dude, I am really tired now. Keep on top of me. Call any deviations you see. And for God's sake, just keep talking to me about anything while we push through this as a team in the cockpit. So I'm happy to say that Transport Canada has also realized the importance of flight and duty times and has imposed prescriptive rules which change the max duty day times based on how many sectors the pilot has to fly, when their duty day starts or ends, and limits the number of duty hours, including non-flying duty, that pilots can perform in specific time periods. Those rules came into force in December 2020, but given the pandemic restriction and flight loads, we're only now beginning to realize their full impact. Toronto to Dubai with relief pilots, smooth ride above the weather, only one departure and landing, fly a little longer. Working in a regional operator doing super short hops and fighting snow, icing, and little to no infrastructure, you'll get more fatigued. Your day has to be shorter. As someone who has flown both types of operations, personally, I'll take a long haul one hop any day, even if the weather at the other end is at minimums. 10 or 11 short hop sectors in northern Canada in January is much more fatiguing for me, in my professional opinion. And our flight and duty time regulations now recognize that. And while prescriptive rule changes are good, Transport Canada has also worked to implement the possibility of fatigue risk management systems, or FRMSs, for operators who can demonstrate they've developed sufficient and conclusive mitigations to manage the associated fatigue and bring it back to the same or lower level than the prescriptive rules would do. And while I'm proud of our flight and duty time changes and the fact that we have an FRMS approval system, I'm also certain that they can be improved over time. And I know that I can count on Tim Perry and the ALPA Canada team to work as a collaborative partner as we move forward together to look at what, if any, improvements can be made. And as a wise flying instructor told me once, always correct to the ideal, recognizing that no one is ever able to sustain the ideal. A great pilot, in my view, is always trying to fly better with each trip, and that pilot relies on his or her crew to help him or her get better. Transport Canada is relying on the other members of our metaphorical team, unions and operators, to help us correct to the ideal. And I know I can count on ALPA to assist where possible. As on any trip, all the best planning and en route decision making is for naught if there's a safety issue on the approach. And quite literally in Canada, we're about to go through our own 5G spectrum auction, which will set the stage for Canadian telecom providers to buy spectrum above the current 3,500 megahertz range and brush up closer to that spectrum allocated for radults. We are concerned about approach safety. Canada is trying to learn lessons from the 5G rollout in the US, and Transport Canada's position has consistently been one whereby we advocate for an aviation operational environment that is no worse off, or in other words, similar to the US environment. We're hopeful that the operational end state in Canada will be one whereby operators and pilots who are flying aircraft modified or retrofitted with 5G-tolerant radults, according to the US definition, will be able to operate to an equal level of operational capability in the Canadian airport environment. As time has worn on, we have learned that 5G presents not just generic operational risks to low-vis ops, i.e. precision approaches requiring radar use. We also know that some aircraft types are also disproportionately affected compared to others, based on weight on wheels or ancillary selection logic and computer things that I probably don't really understand, but respect the engineers for pointing out. And these can have significant operational impact on some aircraft types if they are operated into a 5G unprotected airport environment. Suffice it to say, Transport Canada is working with operators, airports, and other government departments to identify, quantify, and mitigate any risks discovered. Canadian operators can expect radult retrofit timeline guidance from Transport Canada in the near future. And although we have no reason to believe that greater measures will be needed to be taken in the context of 5G radiation in airport environments, you can be assured that Transport Canada will take all measures it deems necessary to guarantee that pilots, aircraft, and passengers can fly into Canadian airports safely in the future. We are in regular, and I mean near daily now, contact with Industry, Science and Economic Development Canada, or ISED as we call it, as we look to move forward together safely, responsibly, and in a way which continues to permit the rebounding growth of Canada's aviation sector post-COVID-19. In order to continue to move forward together in the future, however, the growing pilot shortage will need to be addressed in a measurable and broad way. Indeed, I think, and I want to underscore that I'm giving my own professional opinion here, I'm not giving Transport Canada policy, that foreseeable future demand for qualified pilots will mean that training institutions and/or operators and governments may need to work out more efficient and effective measures to get the best candidates, the best training, in a more reduced time frame in order to meet demand. As an RCAF pilot and an A310 captain, I have personally seen and flown with qualified first tour pilots who arrive at the A310 squadron qualified to fly in the right seat, some with only about 250 hours total in their logbooks. And these pilots were required by regulation to upgrade to captain in 2 years, with some upgrading at around 1,000 hours total time. With a dedicated, full-time, and high-quality training regimen such as that provided by air forces around the world, such results are possible and do not negatively impact aviation safety. I personally flew, this might shock a couple of people, I personally flew during my captain upgrade on the A310 with a first tour training pilot, talented guy, who had instructed me very competently, still in his 20s, less than 2,000 hours total in his logbook. And while I'm not advocating at all for 250-hour heavy jet first officers in industry next year, believe me, I'm not saying that. What I do want to do is plant the seed that in a world where there is demand for a skill set which is increasingly in shorter supply, coming up with ways to move forward together and meet that demand likely requires partners like ALPA, operators, and Transport Canada to think outside the box and use all the resources at our disposal to address the problem. At the end of the day, we agree that pilots must be well trained. It is my, and again, it's my professional opinion, that the competency standard expected to enable safe airline pilots can be achieved through a variety of methods. The historic step-by-step climb from single-engine pistons, building time perhaps as a flying instructor, moving up to King Airs and Twin Otters, mid-side aircraft like the ATR-42, maybe onto jets and finally onto heavies. That works. And it has traditionally served industry pretty well. But when I go to an air show and I see an F-18 demo pilot hanging it out in front of the crowd in a high alpha pass, and the narration says, and Captain Bloggins is a veteran of this operation and that operation and has over 1,200 hours of flying experience, it's obvious that there exist training methodologies which can create exceptionally well-trained pilots in a smaller number of total logbook hours and probably total calendar time from start to finish. And as we look to find solutions for the growing pilot shortage, it is my professional opinion that we may need to look to other successful pilot training regimens in order to find inspiration. But the safety threshold can never be compromised. Passengers and the public expect and rightly require the pilots on the flight deck to possess the skills and competency to handle the most challenging and unforeseen situations. It is possible that although that is sacrosanct, there could exist a variety of training methodologies to get there. And as a guy who started his flying career as an instructor, I'm super interested in seeing where this discussion evolves, as I'm concerned that the status quo may be insufficient to meet the predictable and growing demand. As we move forward together to solve this and other problems we will surely face, I'm comforted by the fact that we have a very strong and productive relationship with ALPA and other unions. I've been a union member before myself, and I continue to support the labor movement. As a public service executive, I can confidently say that my interactions with unions are always positive, if sometimes a little challenging, for sure, but challenging is good. Unions serve to challenge management and keep us accountable and delivering on our commitments to those who are doing the tough jobs we need them to do. So I'd like to thank Tim Perry and the entire ALPA Canada team for the great professional relationship we share. Tim is not afraid to write a very forthright and tough letter to Transport Canada when he feels it is necessary. And believe me, I know, I've gotten a couple of those. But when we approach any problem with the same goal in mind, constantly increasing the level of aviation safety as we always correct to the ideal, it's always easy to work through the challenges in a professional and a respectful manner. As a pilot has been, or when I lived in Alabama, the term probably would have been, I used to was, I'm humbled. Anybody from Alabama here? I'm humbled and awestruck to be in the presence of so many experienced and talented aviators. It's been a breath of fresh air for me this week to be able to talk to pilots again. Anyway, and as a guy whose closest proximity to a stick or a yoke now is achieved in economy class in the back of your aircraft, I'm comforted to know that the folks up front have the training and the expertise to get me home to my wife, sons, and beautiful grandchildren. It has been an honor to speak to you today. I have and I will trust my life to any of you because I know when I board your aircraft, you have the skills to deal with the most challenging scenarios and you'll get me to destination safely. I'm proud to consider myself a member of your crew, and I look forward to working with ALPA, other professional organizations, operators, and other regulatory bodies to do my part to put in place the conditions for my grandkids to continue your proud legacy and be the best darn pilots of their generation. Let's move forward together to achieve that. Thank you.